Hey, everybody. I am so excited for this chat today with Cisco and a conversation around agentic ops and AI-driven NetOps with Cisco, who are just doing incredibly innovative work in this space. And on the heels of Cisco Live, really excited for this update. Joe, how are you?
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for being here. You're a bit of a legend around the halls of Cisco and beyond. How do you describe your role these days and your journey at Cisco?
I came into Cisco from the acquisition of ThousandEyes back in 2020. And, ThousandEyes was an incredible place to work. It still is obviously an incredible place to work. We solved some really interesting problems, right? Back when, ThousandEyes was getting its footing, the rise of internet dependence was growing. People had a stark realization that when you're trying to solve problems across connectivity, that is traversing the internet, you can't take the same normal approaches to it, right? You can't go and take a packet capture of your internet's ISP. You can't look at NetFlow or others. And so how could you rethink visibility in this age of becoming internet dependent and really kind of provide the Google Maps of the internet was what we did. And that was extremely powerful. And now, the problem has changed again, right? We've gone from cloud as the new data center and internet the new network and SaaS the new application to now, in many ways, this AI era that's introducing a new wave of complexity into how people build and operate networks.
A new wave of complexity indeed. Agentic ops, agentic AI, these are two of your key focus areas. How do you frame those, given all the excitement around Gen AI and agentic across industries and different use cases? How do you describe the mission right now at Cisco?
Yeah, I think it's important probably for everybody to step away from the terms and get down to, at the end of the day, what does this mean for customers? What does it mean for operations teams? And what's fundamentally different now that you couldn't have done in the past? And for this industry's used terms like AIOps in the past. And when I think about AIOps, is really good at using, say, machine learning to identify anomalies and surface those anomalies to you. But you still, as a operator, really had to use your brain to kind of stitch together the data to understand, okay, well, how do I act on it? It was incredibly valuable for you to sift through all these alerts and identify really the alerts that matter and how things are shifting across your environment. But you were still very much in the chain of thought to actually go and act on it. Then we use this term, Gen AI. What did Gen AI do? Well, it maybe allowed us to then take a verbose alert and put it in a human readable way so that maybe other people could understood what that alert did, but it still required the human to then act on it. Now we get to the agentic part, and really this is where we have the ability for the entire system to not only sense what's happening across the environment and to then intelligently reason without, say, structured machine learning algorithms to actually solve problems that are very ambiguous, but then importantly, be able to then act, to then drive that through the full closure of the resolution. And that I think is going to be incredibly powerful for how people rethink how network operations teams operate in the future.
Brilliant. And Cisco Live, the agentic ops story was very much a now story. It's a 2026 story, and customers are getting value immediately. Explain how they are and what are the opportunities for customers.
I was talking to a customer even last week that unfortunately spent a significant amount of time chasing what can be characterized as a very simple problem, but a very repeatable problem, which is, hey, users are frustrated because they can't get access to the network. And unfortunately, what they were sharing with me was, what ultimately transpired was there was a DHCP pool exhaustion, right? So people try to connect to a network, we're getting an IP address assigned to them. That manifests as, hey, I can't get on the network. But actually getting to that diagnosis and solving that problem is significantly still a challenge. And so when you think about that loop of how you can leverage these agentic capabilities to not only detect that you have a problem, but also diagnose that problem, but then also drive that into the remediation. It can become hugely valuable. And so, actually at Cisco Live last week, we showed on stage how we can take that from, again, what this customer based in Asia that took them multiple days to get to the root cause and ultimately solve the problem, to us being able to detect it in real time, to diagnose it, and then ultimately drive a workflow that solves that problem. That now is, truly taking things that would have maybe taken days, if not hours, down to minutes to address. And that's going to be profoundly impactful for where operations teams are able to spend their time.
Brilliant. Of course, everyone's talking about AI agents becoming part of the workforce. I can attest to that. My small business, I have about 5 agents doing different activities around the clock as we speak. It's pretty phenomenal. But, I have a little home network. What do networks need to be designed for when the machines are users, not just people?
Yeah, so I think we're going through this transition, as you just mentioned, of not only human to human communication, but then human to AI. You talk with your agents to help you to do work, to then also AI to AI communication. As agents are going to communicate with themselves, as you build more special purpose capabilities within your tech stack, or as you build networks, you build specialized agents to perform specific functions across that lifecycle. Now that's going to create, some different challenges. So, one of them is when you think about networks today, you have a level of predictability in terms of traffic patterns across your environments, how people come into networks at a certain time. Imagine you come into an office at in the morning, you leave in the afternoon. You can see very predictable peaks and valleys in your network traffic, to now potentially having agents that don't sleep, right? They're constantly working. They're going to surge together when they have a problem. And so you're going to see this level of burstiness in others. Now, the other challenge is how do you secure that traffic? And how do you apply identity within the agents themselves to be able to go and drive the drive towards an action? And so how you apply a level of microsegmentation across your networks to ensure that agents can only communicate with the other agents that you tell them to. Agents aren't necessarily able to go and access random databases. Because I think if you look at it, right, you give an agent an objective, you give it a goal, and it's going to do everything possible to go and try to achieve that goal, even if it necessarily violates your own practices, right? We've seen that even with the rise of Cloudbot and now OpenClaw as a within the industry. And just imagine as more and more people begin to run agents on their devices, how that's going to create a profound change in how networks need to be designed, how networks need to be secured, and also obviously how we can all think about operations and leveraging digital teammates to be able to extend the impact we can have as network engineers and architects and ultimately builders of networks across campuses.
Yeah, it's a total sea change. Really amazing to witness. Another thing we're hearing from customers is, observability and networking security coming together. You have a unique bird's eye view of organizations. Are they really breaking down these silos, and how much of a work in progress is that?
That's a great call out, because again, if you go back to what is the end of the day the objective, which is how do we deliver great experiences across our connectivity as a business. But great experiences is really a combination of not only do you have great connectivity, but then you have the right security posture to protect the business, but a security posture that doesn't impact the experience. How do you think about the observability? Because at the end of the day, also, the connectivity doesn't just end at your edge of your network. It traverses all the way through the intranet and into those applications. So what we've seen, obviously, historically, is that these independent functions, whether it's security or networking or observability, always had their own view into the world, right? You had an observability tool that was able to look at my observability data, networking that would look at my connectivity, security, look at policy, posture. But at the end of the day, they're all in service of a great experience. And so what we see now is actually through this agentic operations, the ability to not only solve problems that cross domains, but also allow observability teams have a better understanding about what's happening at the network, or for security teams to understand how that's impacting the experience so that they can work together and solve problems. At Cisco, right, this is really underpinning our strategy within AI Canvas, which is in many ways the canvas for where we could bring together cross domains to help investigate and to solve complex problems that span across infrastructure, across networking, across security, across collaboration, observability. That could also allow people to work together in a multiplayer type of a mode where you have many people that are interacting into that same canvas, trying to solve problems or trying to improve that experience. I think that's going to foster a new form of really collaboration across these functions.
So when you talk to enterprises, they have a lot going on today. Hybrid work continues. Your colleagues at WebEx are doing yeoman's work there. Got SaaS and cloud, Wi-Fi, internet. I was at Gartner last year, and there was a large insurance company that had 70 plus pilots of AI projects going on in the enterprise at one time. Where are companies still flying blind when it comes to what's happening on their network that they may not even realize?
At the end of the day, I think the blind spots are in the hidden dependencies that you take without really realizing it, right? We saw it even in a very practical way this past fall, where there was a number of high-profile outages within cloud providers that impacted SaaS applications that businesses rely upon, right? So you take a dependency on a SaaS application, you don't realize that you're taking a dependency, therefore, on the cloud that they run on, or you're taking a dependency on the DNS provider that they rely upon, or the CDN provider that they rely upon. And as we think about now in this new AI era, and people building, say, agentic systems directly into the application, right? I'm going to take my application and I'm going to make a LLM call to a leading frontier model. Well, that's traversing the network. You're making a call. So now your users, when they're complaining about your application, well, where is the problem within it? And so the time to not only detect, but time to diagnose problems and localize those problems is going to continually get harder. The more dependencies and the more of that complexity that we introduce into our system, and therefore lies like the paradox, because at the end of the day, connectivity is only going to get more complex, and at the same time, operations teams are only going to be asked to do more with less. And so we believe, at Cisco, right, that agentic operations is really the only way to begin to address that paradox.
Fascinating. And speaking of that, when something breaks on the internet, despite how far we come, users, customers don't really care whose fault it is. They just blame IT, the mythical IT. Are tools giving answers to internal teams faster and better than we have in the past?
In the past, right, we were able to use kind of we'll call it find and fix mentality, right? You would identify where along the path the problem was. You could go plug that router, that switch, that access point, and fix it. And now you have to kind of shift to I'll call like an evidence and escalate mode, where you gather the evidence along the path of where the problem is. That might be a team inside your organization, but outside your control, but it also could very much be a segment that's outside of your boundaries, such as the internet, your ISP, your SaaS application. You need to be able to show them the evidence of here's when the problem started, here's the specific IP address or interface where the problem is localized to, and do that in a way that creates a common operational language that allow teams to respond. And at ThousandEyes, we've really seen this become incredibly powerful for teams to work together within their enterprise, working together with their service providers, their cloud providers, and their SaaS providers. And in many ways, this has actually led to the SaaS providers and cloud providers and ISPs, they themselves using ThousandEyes to create this bridge between these teams so that they can work together to deliver a great digital experience.
Fantastic. So you and I are both headed to Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, of course, the annual get together. And it's really incredible to see how far network operators, service providers have come in their sophistication around the enterprise and enterprise services. What are some of the top themes or even tools that you think they should have in their wheelhouse these days?
You know, many ways, like how do you standardize how you respond to incidents is going to be incredibly powerful, right? A lot of the time that's still lost in solving problems is how do you organize the incident response team to do that initial triage, to know where to focus in that path. And so leveraging an active approach and having a strong operational discipline for how do you proactively detect issues and how do you localize the issues is going to be important, because where I see continually problems exist is when you have an incident response and you might have 100 people on that call all trying to work together to solve a problem. Like that in many ways I think is a indicator that you're even farther away from solving that problem. When you can come into a common view, when you can be able to identify this is the segment of where the problem exists, you can then release, say, 90% of the people, and the people that are left are empowered to be able to go and to address that problem. I think that's going to be critically important.
Fantastic. And you've been close to the operational side for a long time. Do you think AI will eventually run the network or get close to running the network, or are we still in the mode of making humans faster, smarter, and better at their job?
There's still very much I'll call it a trust deficit that has to be overcome before you can move to truly we'll call it like the level 5 autonomy, where agents are just running the network. Because at the end of the day, we have to remember that networks are what enable hospitals to operate. This is what enables doctors to serve patients. It's what enables the checkout stand at a grocery store to run. It's what enables you to access your money from your financial institution. And so networks are the most mission critical part of a business. And so we can use agentic operations in a very much an autonomous way in terms of that detection and diagnosis. But I think we're still working towards addressing some of that trust deficit for how do you then provide a level of deterministic execution for the action that's going to be taken to make a change on that core network. At Cisco, one of the things that we're looking at and working on is how do we leverage the decades of experience we have in running the most mission critical networks of the world, and then codify that within our own model. So an example of that is, we announced last year our deep network model that begins to leverage the 40 plus years of attack cases and our understanding of the most complex networks and how to solve problems and how to build networks, and be able to use that to provide a level of additional trust, because judgment and trust are going to be critical to not only helping you to know you have a problem and know why you have a problem, but then to actually drive that in a hands-free way.
Fantastic. So we're already on the road to the next Cisco Live in a few months. What do you hope customers will be sharing about their network, given all the new innovation and tools and solutions you've introduced? What kind of feedback do you imagine getting from those customers in a few short months?
One of the key things that I'm talking to customers that they're already starting to realize, but I think will continue to be amplified, is how do we avoid tickets from being created in the first place? How do we use that from a true proactive posture that says, instead of measuring success of, hey, we solved a problem faster, how can we avoid the user even knowing that there was a problem in the first place? And having that end-to-end intelligence from the device to the cloud, being able to then leverage agents that augment our team's work, being able to pinpoint problems and then use deterministic execution and workflows to solve that problem. I think we can get to that point where customers are able to look and see a measured impact in terms of the number of, say, employee IT tickets that even get created in the first place. I think that's going to be a very measurable way that we can expect to hear from customers over the coming months.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear more at Cisco Live. And congratulations on all the innovation, all the success, the launches. It's really phenomenal to witness from the outside.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Evan.
Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening, watching, sharing this episode. Be sure to look me up at MWC or HIMSS or Enterprise Connect or RSA, the many shows that are out there this spring. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thanks.